Welcome to tonight's live stream. I'm going to get started in a minute. I just need to get things ready before I start the show. So what's going on, D-Wood78? Glad to see you here. I'm getting ready to go into some perfunctory before I do tonight's show. Now, tonight's show was delayed a bit because I wanted to watch the AEW Rampage debut, and I have to say it was a fantastic show. They just did a well booked, well crafted wrestling show with great setup and really put together something that was really well crafted as related to storytelling and also just really fantastic matches. So AEW Rampage is a show I highly recommend to all my wrestling fans out there. You definitely are going to enjoy this show more than Dynamite because it's just the way even though it was an hour, it just felt like it went away very quickly. So I was very, very happy with AEW Rampage. Now, I'm going to get into some more perfunctory because I have some really exciting news that's related to the John Haynes at Death's Door comic. I just got the third page from the artist, and that third page just looks incredible. I mean, this third page just blew me away for John Haynes at Death's Door, and the artist who's drawing it right now is doing an amazing job. So I can't wait to share the John Haynes at Death's Door comic with you all, and I'm hoping to have enough pages so that I can show you a little sneak peek of what's going on with that comic soon. I just want to have enough pages together of the comic to really show you the story. And I'm still on the fence of whether I want to do a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo, or if I just wanted to go take it straight to Amazon. So I really would like to do something special as related to crowdfunding because this is a really great book and I really want to share it with everybody. So I'm still getting ready to do things with that. And I'm also getting ready to launch the SJS Direct 2021 Fall Catalog. And the two books of the SJS Direct 2021 Fall Catalog are available for pre-order on Kindle right now. Stop simping in cyberspace. You can get that on Kindle right now with pre-order. Paperback is coming this October. And I've also launched eSteam Cancellation. That's available for pre-order on Kindle right now. And you can get that book for pre-order right now. And I'm in a little bit of a slump as related to sales, so I'm asking everybody to head over to Amazon and pick up some books because this month has been really slow. So that's what I'm asking everybody to come out here and do. Now I'm going to get into tonight's topic, and tonight's topic is about the decline of Hollywood and mainstream legacy media. Now, your mainstream legacy media and Hollywood practically were the media arm of America for over a century, and they had incredible power and influence. And like what I talked about in a previous live stream about Hollywood's waning influence, what we're seeing is that's just a symptom of the decline of your Hollywood and your mainstream legacy media. Now, from the 1900s all the way up until I say about 2009, your Hollywood and legacy media had incredible power and incredible influence over the American mind. However, over the last 11 years, Hollywood's influence has not been as strong as it was in its prime heydays of the 1940s and 1950s, or the silver period, as I call it, of the 70s to the 2000s. No, these days, most people are not really tuning in to a lot of legacy media, and that has a lot of those in the mainstream media who control it, and even some people in the government really anxious and extremely nervous because it's like I've said in many live streams and videos, those who control the money control the media, and those who control the media control the narrative. And those who have the money, they see that their media is not really being paid attention to or listened to these days. So they're not really able to go out here and control many of the narratives and be able to influence the thinking of the average American. So they're seeing that their whole hold on the American people's minds is breaking. And that started with their attempts to try to gain more control over the media platforms. Now, back in the 1990s, you had an effort to try to expand America's media platforms that from just a handful of networks, which were just back in the day, it was only CBS, NBC, ABC, and in the late 80s and 90s, Fox, and a handful of local channels. You had efforts made during the Clinton administration to create what they called a 500 channel TV universe. And this happened as we started to see cable expand. And as cable expanded, we saw a plan put in place to deregulate America's media, because back in the day, you had American media was heavily regulated, and many of the corporate types, they wanted to gain more power as related to controlling the media. And in an effort to try to gain control over America's media, what they did was propose a telecommunications bill to deregulate the media and make it where one person could own more than one TV network, one newspaper, and one magazine in an area. So what they wanted to do under the proposal was get away from these old federal regulations, which insisted that one person could only control one TV station, one newspaper, one magazine, and one radio station. And this was done because they wanted to make sure that we could get a whole host of counterpoints in the media, because they feared if one owner controlled all of the media, you would not be able to get a diverse set of views in that media. And in 1996, we saw the federal government under Republican Congress and a Democrat President, Bill Clinton, go out here and create the Telecommunications Bill of 1996. And this Telecommunications Bill of 1996, what it did was deregulate the media here in America and made it where your corporate owners could go out here and buy more than one newspaper, more than one radio station, more than one TV station. And this completely changed the face of American media. So as we started to see these companies going out here and buying up radio stations and buying media platforms like newspapers and magazines, we started to see the media platforms go from thousands of independent stations to all of these stations owned by about 6 people from the year 2000. So in 4 years, we saw all of America's media go from being independently owned to being owned by a handful of media conglomerates that made up what people call the Big Six. Now, this Big Six consisted of your Disney, your Time Warner at the time, your Viacom, your, I believe it wasn't Comcast at the time, but the owner of NBC, and there was another one, but there were six of them. And in the last 20 years, we've seen us go from six owners. Now it's shrinking down to even four owners. And as we got that big six media platform, we started to see a complete change in content on mainstream media. And instead of us getting diversity of viewpoints and diversity of thought, what we got was a lot of networks giving us a lot of the same reruns on their cable channels. And we started to see creativity start to take a serious decline. So instead of these networks competing like they did, where they would go out here and have content like syndicated shows, news shows, and shows that were dramas and stuff on each of the channels competing against each other, we started to see a lot of these media owners really start to take their audience for granted. And as they started taking their audience for granted, what they did was they started not being very creative with their content. And this is what's happening right for the last couple of years. There's not really been that much creativity because there's not much competition on legacy media. Now, what further exacerbates the problem with the mainstream media as related to content was the decision to go digital in 2009. Now, after they passed that telecommunications bill in 1996, which allowed them to consolidate America's media platforms and give us this practically monolithic thought, we started to see the TV platforms decide they were going to change the format from NSTC, which was the media platform American media was on for over 100 years almost, and go to ASTC. And this was another critical mistake, which led to the complete, as I see it, decline of American media and Hollywood. Because once we had the NSTC platforms, even though people were going out here buying plasma TVs and buying LCD TVs, people were still watching a lot of the mainstream content on your cable platforms. But once TV went digital in 2009, that's when we started to see the cracks as related to the decline of American media come to start showing the damage that was done to America's media platforms with the Telecommunications Bill of 1996. Because once TV went digital and people no longer could use their old televisions, what happened was a lot of people had reason to walk away from mainstream television, and they had a reason to migrate to the internet. Now, the internet had been around since the 70s or the 80s, I believe, and most people didn't use it because it was really expensive. But in the 90s, we started to see with AOL the price of the internet go down, and by 2000, the internet had become affordable, practically becoming about $29.95 a month. And in the mid 2000s, the internet became even more affordable because we started to see a lot of these high-speed internet platforms being presented on cable and even phone service platforms like Verizon. And as those high-speed internet platforms came to become mainstream in American homes, then the TV networks started to get some real serious competition. And they got that competition not from Hollywood studios, but they got them from internet content creators. Now, these internet content creators, they started out making basic websites, but once we started entering into the era of high-speed internet, we started to see that the average everyday person could start creating content like podcasts. And as digital video started to evolve from the days of the 56K modem, we started to see people in the beginning who had their own personal websites making video. And then once YouTube came along, that's when we started to see the cracks start to become heavy fissures in the mainstream media platform. We started to see that people were starting to get to know many YouTubers more than television people, and they were more, especially a lot of the younger people were watching platforms like YouTube. So because the content where people could broadcast themselves was starting to become a lot more compelling than the mainstream media TV shows, where a lot of these producers were taking their audience for granted. And we started to see that because back in the days of the 60s, 70s, and even before then, the 50s, TV shows, they only used to last about 5 years before the network would cancel them. But we were starting to see TV shows start to go on for 10, 15, 20, and now even in the case of shows like NCIS, practically 25 years, something that was practically unheard of in the prime days of TV in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. Back then, again, a TV show usually wound up ending in 5 years, and it ended because it met its quota for TV episodes as related to syndication. Because the syndication market, after you made maybe 100, 125 episodes, you usually ended the show and you went out here and sold the show in syndication and made money off the royalties. But after the late 90s and early 2000s, after the consolidation of media, we didn't really see many of the studios having the same incentive to end TV shows. So TV shows like The Simpsons, TV shows like Two and a Half Men, TV shows like your NCIS, these shows have practically gone on for over a decade. And even in the case of The Simpsons and Family Guy, some of these shows have gone on for 30 years. Again, this was never heard of in the heyday of television. I mean, maybe one or two shows would go on that long, but this was just not something that was considered to be done. Good evening, Nightingale Wednesday Nightmare. Good evening, Rocket Man, Rocky Matrix. Good evening, Gabria. Glad to see you all here. I am talking about the decline of Hollywood and mainstream legacy media. And I wanted to really go into this subject because gboot2786, he had an article on Facebook where he had taken it from the New York Post. And in that article on the New York Post, it was talking about how your CBS Viacom was in play for being available for sale. And the whole, I'm gonna leave the article up here about CBS Viacom may be up for sale, because this is another troubling trend, because just a couple of years ago, we saw Disney go out here and buy Fox, and that's when the Big Six became the Big Four. And if your CBS Viacom winds up getting sold, then we're going to see mainstream media start to further consolidate. And these consolidations are a sign that your Hollywood is in trouble, and it's a sign that mainstream media is in trouble, because when you have multi-billion-dollar corporations going out here and consolidating like this, it's because they are not really pulling the profits like they used to. And they're not pulling the profits like they used to because there is no competition. Because the deregulation of American media stifled creativity for your mainstream media platforms, and it stifled the ability to go out here and fight for new shows. So nobody's really fighting for a new show on TV anymore, and people just aren't watching TV anymore, basically because there is no real content out here. and they're not really, there's no real content because of all of the consolidation. Because when you have a lot of corporate consolidation, there's no way for anybody to have an incentive to go out here and do better and even try harder. Now, when I looked at the article as related to the CBS Viacom speculations for sale, I thought about what happened to your Les Moonves. Now, your Les Moonves, who was running CBS until about 2019, I believe, what happened with him was he had to deal with some Me Too allegations as related to sexual harassment. And after he was removed from his position, Sherry Redstone went out here and got a hold of CBS, which was a separate company from Viacom, and merged those two companies together. And when I heard about your Sherry Redstone merging CBS and Viacom back then, I knew it was a completely bad deal because as somebody who has studied the media for over 25 years, I understood that this was a bad deal because when you have a company like her part was Viacom was struggling, and CBS was basically on the end of its cycle of popular shows because CBS was the number one network all the way up until about 2018 or 2019 when The Big Bang Theory ended its run. And your Les Moonves, he understood that the CBS network was not going to be valuable. And even though they were making allegations of harassment against him, what happened was he went out here and played chess and got himself a deal where he would go out here and make money, and the Sherry Redstone would get a lemon of a network. And that's what happened to Sherry Redstone. And that's why she's shopping around your CBS at this point, because CBS Viacom has no value anymore. So she's trying to shop this around to Comcast in the hopes that they'll buy this lemon of a network, because she knows that she cannot get any more viewers for the network because they have no content. And a lot of these networks, they're having serious problems getting content because a lot of people who are producers, they are not taking their content to network television. No, they're taking their content to streaming. And they're taking their content to streaming because streaming will allow them to get more of the younger viewers, and streaming will allow them to be able to make more money on views and get more money on advertising. So most of the producers of content, they used to go out here and try to get a deal with a TV network, or they would go out here and try to get a deal with a movie studio. But these days, a lot of content producers, they making content and they're selling their shows to streaming services like Netflix, streaming services like Hulu, or streaming services like Amazon, and they're looking to get deals with them instead of going to Hollywood. They're taking their business elsewhere, and they're taking their business elsewhere because they want to get those younger viewers that used to go out here and watch TV on the regular. But the younger viewers are no longer watching TV anymore. No, TV has basically become the platform for basically Gen Xers, and most of the people, the Gen Y, the millennials, and Gen Z, they have moved over to your platforms like YouTube, and they've moved over to platforms like streaming. And this migration was something many in the mainstream media did not expect to happen. And many of those guys, they just couldn't see the chessboard long term. Gabria makes a good point about Les Moonves basically being a slime ball. And he was. He destroyed Janet Jackson's career, and he allegedly abused a lot of women. And all of this is on record. And he was a jerk to a lot of people because as a TV executive, he had a lot of leverage. back then, and he abused his power back then, but he did understand the chessboard as related to mainstream media, and he saw the bigger picture that I saw as related to what was happening with CBS and Viacom. And this is it really the mainstream media platforms, they are declining as we speak, and nobody is really watching them anymore. And nobody's watching, excuse me, anymore because it's all about content, and content is king. And if you don't have content, you're not going to get the viewers. So they have all of these types of TV shows and stuff like this that they're trying to put on these platforms. Unfortunately, a lot of the content they put on there, it does not appeal to many of the younger viewers or the older viewers. It's just so bad that it just turns you off. And this is one of the problems with your mainstream media these days, is that they really don't appeal to most of the viewers. A lot of the executives there, they are either these extremely old baby boomer men or women who have these old ideas, or you got these what they call SJW woke types, and these people are pushing some of the craziest ideas, and none of these ideas follow the critical question of screenwriting. Why should we care? And that's a critical question most of these new types and these old types don't understand, that when you're making content, you have to make content that appeals to the viewer, and you have to make content that the viewer will go out here and identify and relate to. So a lot of back in the day, they made all of these different TV shows and movies that people could identify and relate to. Unfortunately, these days, a lot of people are not relating to a lot of the content, so they just aren't watching a lot of the Hollywood content anymore. And again, that has a lot of these people in the entertainment industry extremely anxious, because if people are not watching your content, then you can't get anybody to advertise and sponsor your shows, and that means you can't make any money. So the legacy media, they are practically terrified these days because they just can't get anybody to sit there and watch their shows. But when you look at a lot of their content, it just isn't very appealing anymore. I mean, when I look at, I was a diehard TV addict ever since I was about maybe 4 years old. And here I am at 47 going on 48, and I barely watch any television anymore. I mean, I used to watch the Decades Network and MeTV, and sometimes I would watch shows like Big Bang Theory, or I would watch some shows like Gordon Ramsay's MasterChef. But that's just about it for me these days in wrestling, like AEW and WWE. But I do not watch TV like I used to. I mean, I used to watch TV from about 7 a.m. all the way up to 11 p.m. But but I don't watch that type of television anymore because the content is just so bad. Especially a lot of the newer shows, there's nothing there that you can relate to, because what happens is a lot of these mainstream types, they're so busy censoring a lot of the content that it basically just becomes unwatchable. Because it's something I talk about, executive meddling. You get an executive who comes in here, and what they do is they want to try to push agendas in their stories, and these agendas are the things that turn people off. Now, my first experience with agendas was watching the Drew Carey Show. Now, I used to watch the Drew Carey Show back in the 90s in the first 2 seasons of Drew Carey. And in that first 2 seasons, I liked it because it was a working class guy who was just trying to go out here and build a life. He had bought his mother's house. He was trying to start a beer company in his garage and he was trying to get a girl. So it was a lot of relatable things there. But as the show went on, they started to push the IT agenda. And as they started to push the IT agenda, that's when I started to get turned off with that show. And it was one of those shows that I wound up stop watching after about 1998 or 1999 or so, because they had pushed this it agenda so much that I just could not relate to that character. And that was my first run in with Agenda. My second run in with Agenda was when I was watching The Color Purple and shows like Girlfriends, and I started to see the misandristic anti-black man agenda. Yes, Jibu, that's what I mean by it. I got that from Black Male Advice Ringo. That's what I got from him. But they were pushing that it agenda heavily in Drew Carey. And if you watch the Drew Carey show on Laugh TV, you'll see that they pushed that agenda real hard, and it just kept the show. It was a very funny show, but they killed it by pushing that agenda so constantly. And that was my first encounter with it. But the second encounter I had with it was when they did the Girlfriend show, which had a very anti-black man narrative, and shows like The Game. I just did not like seeing them portray black men so negatively. And it's all of these agendas that are the thing that turn off a lot of viewers. And it's these agendas that mainstream media loves to push in a lot of their shows that makes it where you just don't want to watch them, because you go to TV for an escape, you go to TV for a laugh, and this makes it where you don't want to see many of these TV shows. Now, Drew Carey was the first It Agenda show I saw. Xena Warrior Princess started to turn into an It Agenda show, and that turned me off. And I stopped watching that. That was another show that turned me off. And these are the kind of things that make viewers not want to watch. And as we went from the late 90s to the 2000s, we started to see a lot of TV shows really pushing these narratives. Either they were anti-black narratives or anti-man narratives or superwoman narratives. And by the time we started to get into the 2010s, we started to see the agendas being pushed in a lot of these shows. And this was a reason why I started to really pull back on some TV shows, and I would watch movies here and there. And usually I would go watch old movies and stuff like that. And then when TV went digital, I started watching a lot more older TV shows. And I started to see that there were some shows like Mary Tyler Moore, which had a feminist agenda, and Alice. But the agenda shows were not the heavy part of the platform. But as time has gone on, we've just got nothing but agendas in these shows. And it's these agendas that make your TV just unwatchable. And these days, as they were making the agendas on TV, they were also not really giving us rich diversity as related to the movies. Now, your movies, they were coming back from a slump in the 60s. Back in the 60s, they had the Vietnam War, and you had Hollywood executives who were disconnected like they are right now, talking about how they wanted to make all of these war movies, these epic movies, these musicals, but people were coming home from Vietnam with shell shock and seeing horrors and traumas. So they didn't want to see people singing and dancing or big epic movies about a war that was completely different from theirs. So that was the first decline of Hollywood and led to the big slump, which led to new people coming in, like Melvin Van Peebles, people like your Tom Laughlin, and many others who gave us a different kind of movie. Unfortunately, unlike the people in the late 60s and early 70s, we are starting to see that they're not letting that talent in. Thank you, Don't Be Triggered 88, for buying Spellbound. I hope you enjoy it. I wrote that book to make a commentary on the black box that's acceptable to white people and the spellbound mindset that many black people have. So I'm hoping you enjoy that book. And I'm going to leave a link to Spellbound because it's a book that I think a lot of people will learn something from. And I hope that you get something out of it I wrote it to be entertaining and make social commentary. So so I'm gonna get back to the topic, and if you guys could donate to the Cash App, that would be greatly appreciated. Um, so what's going on, Gabriel? Glad to see you here. And people, they don't. Back in the '60s, they realized that they needed a different kind of movie. But these days, today's executives, they don't want to give people a different kind of movie. It's like they are just so caught up in the box office numbers for all of these superhero movies that we don't really get any sort of variety. So either Hollywood makes these blockbuster superhero movies, or they go out here and they make these art house movies, but they don't answer that critical question of the average everyday American. Why should we care? And it's like, yeah, you can go out here and make a whole bunch of big budget superhero movies, and it seems like they've got the stranglehold on the box office, but people want to see stories about human characters, and they want to see stories about the human condition. And that's something that they're not seeing these days. And what's even worse about today's superhero movies is that we're not getting a story that's based on the source material. What we're seeing is the creeping in of social justice and identity politics. And as this social justice and identity politics creeps into the movies, this is one of the things that's alienating a lot of viewers. So a lot of viewers, they wanted to go to the movies, but they don't see the escape they used to get back in the 70s and the 80s with movies like Star Wars, or movies like the teen movies or the horror movies. No, what we get is a whole host of social justice and identity politics where people just go out here and try to preach at the audience. And when you preach at the audience, that's the thing that turns them off. So most of your audience, they want to go out here and see a fun movie. They want an escape. They want to see good guys beating the bad guys. But we've got a lot of elitists who are just disconnected from people because they have this big corporate oligarchy, and they believe that they are in such a high place they can tell the viewer what to think. And that comes from a place of extreme hubris. These people think that because they are wealthy or heavily connected, they have a right to sit there and use their platforms to go out here and preach to the audience. And some of them, they go out here and they try to pander to other audiences in the hopes of trying to win their favor. And when you go out here and pander, you're actually coming from a position of weakness, and you're not saying that your product has value. That's one of the things that your SJW woke types really don't understand about the entertainment business that is leading to its decline. You have many of them who just think, oh, I can go out here and make my content, and people are just supposed to like it. And they think that because they're working on these big media corporations, that people have to go out here and buy their products. So they really have no real connection to what selling is to the customer. And it's all about them. And that's one of the other big problems that has led to the decline of Hollywood is we're starting to see that these people that like your vanity publishers, they are not interested in serving the customer. They're all about sating their ego. So that's one of the big problems that is leading to the decline of the entertainment industry. A lot of these people have a really self-centered mindset, and that's why people get turned off by what they call your SJW woke types, because they live in their own little world. They push their own narratives, push these ideas, and they think people are just supposed to take what's given to them, not understanding that entertainment is a service business. So they don't really understand that it's a service business and your job is to give the customer what they want, not what you want, but what they want. And yes, you are telling your story to the customer, but it's your job to give the customer what they want. I mean, the customer wants to go out here, they want an escape, and they want to get away from their problems because the average American these days, they are extremely stressed, whether it be by the pandemic or their issues as related to employment or their anxieties about day to day. And they want a break from the troubles of their life. Unfortunately, many in the entertainment industry don't want to give people that break. What they want to do is go out here and attack the customer by going out here and trying to push an agenda on them. One, and then what they want to do is go out here and then condescend to the customer. And then when the customer pulls back and recoils from the abuse they are suffering, then they want to blame the customer for why they're not buying the product. What they want to do is foster a codependent relationship with the customer, but the customer is not interested in being abused. What the customer wants is interdependence, and they want an interdependent relationship with the customer. So this is where your people like your boomer executives and your so-called SJW woke types have a real disconnect because they're sitting there thinking that it's all about what they want to do, what they want to give the customer, and what then the customer has to just take what is given to them. They come from a real place of arrogance, and they don't understand that this is why your media platforms are falling. They are primarily falling because the customer is not being considered, and these people just want to go out here and make things the way they want to make them, and then they just get upset when their products don't really sell. For example, your Disney recently bought Marvel Comics, and in an effort to push so-called diversity and inclusion, they went out here and changed many of the characters to these different type of ethnicities, like your Pakistani Kamala Khan, Ms. Marvel, your Riri Williams Ironheart, your Miles Morales Spider-Man, your Amadeus Cho Hulk. And people grew up with Steve Rogers, Tony Stark, Peter Parker, and Bruce Banner, white males, and that really alienated a lot of those readers who had been reading those books for years. But many of those people pushing the so-called diversity, which were primarily white females and some beta white males, they didn't understand why their books were not connecting with the reader, but they didn't understand that you were alienating the core customer base. And when you alienate the core customer base that had been reading a product for over 50 or 60 years, this is not going to generate sales. So they were sitting there upset, wondering, oh, why is my sales declining? Why aren't people interested in the media I'm producing? And they didn't go out here and approach the customer and ask them what they wanted. They wanted to insist the customer just take what is given to them, and they didn't understand how they were disrespecting the customer. And as they disrespected the customer, what they did was something that I call leaving money on the table. And leaving that money on the table, this is one of the reasons why your Hollywood and the entertainment industry are in decline. Many of these boomer executives and many of these woke types, they are out here. They think that because they control the institutions, they have all the leverage. Unfortunately, in their efforts to produce content, what they're doing is leaving lots of money on the table. And as they leave that money on the table, this is what leads to people gaining opportunities. And what's happening now is, like in the comic book medium, you're starting to see people take advantage of those opportunities. So what happens is guys like your Richard C. Meyer and Ethan Van Sciver, they started the trend of the independent comic creator. And they started using platforms like Kickstarter and Indiegogo to launch comics. And those comics were made what the customer wanted. And when you go out here and make what the customer wants, then you're going to go out here and make the money, because the big companies have left the money on the table. And when you leave money on the table, then others come in and take it. Because, for example, in the comic book medium, you had people who were out here spending $100 at the comic shop, $200 at the comic shop, sometimes a week. And all of that money that was spent at the comic shop is now being spent with independent content creators. The same thing with your cable TV. All of that money that used to be spent on cable TV is now being spent on platforms like the Amazon's Prime and other platforms. And that's what happens when you have the wrong people in charge. The wrong people in charge, they take their customer for granted. They believe that because they own the platform, the audience is compelled to come there, and they believe that the audience has to take whatever's given to them, not understanding that you compete in a marketplace. And in a marketplace where there is no competition, or you have people working and don't understand the concept of competition because everything is so conglomerated, what happens is, and amalgamated, you have people who don't understand that in a marketplace, you have to compete. And when you go out here and compete, you have to go out here and provide what the customer wants, not what you want to give them. Because in the vanity publishing world, you have people who go out here and want to make books, but they make books that are for themselves and not for the customer. But in the real world, people go out here and make product for the customer, and that product is made to appeal to the largest amount of customers who can go out here and give you money in exchange for the product. That's basically supply and demand. But many of your old boomers don't understand this because they've gotten old and they take their customer for granted. And your whole social justice types, they take it for granted because they believe that because this corporation has billions of dollars, they can go out here and use that company's institution and its characters to push agenda. But this is why your entertainment industry is in serious decline in print media and in television and film, because they don't want to go out here and give the customer what they want. Now, in addition to not wanting to give the customer what they want, we have a lot of celebrities who are filled with hubris, and that hubris is one of the reasons why a lot of people just turned off with today's celebrities. Now, back in the day, your celebrities used to have influence because they would go out here and have publicists and other handlers to help them deal with the public and allow them to craft an image that was appealing to the customer. But these days, a lot of celebrities go on social media, they start running their mouth, and they wind up saying things that are incredibly stupid, like the recent celebrities who talked about not washing, and other bootlegs like your Terry Crews, who recently went out here and tried to agree with them for brownie points. Now, this kind of stuff, it does not appeal to the viewers and the people who want to buy your entertainment. When they hear you going out here making statements like this, it just winds up alienating a lot of people. And what further alienates a lot of people is the fact that you have celebrities on award shows going out here making these big brand speeches about how you're supposed to live. And that kind of condescension really turns people off. And that's why award shows ratings have been plummeting for the last 5 or 6 years, because people just don't really like the idea of people talking down to them, especially people who they're paying their salary when they go to the movies. So that's another reason why Hollywood is in decline. Many celebrities don't understand that you have to form a relationship with your viewers, and you have to form a relationship to connect with your viewers that shows them how much you care about them. So that's a mistake that many of your celebrities make, that many YouTubers don't make, because when I look at YouTubers, a lot of them, including myself, we go out of our way to talk to the audience. We go out of our way to connect with the audience. We go out of our way to care, to show how much we care about the audience. And we do that by being transparent, being straightforward, and letting people know what things are being done. And that's all a part of the business that is out here with your YouTubers that your Hollywood celebrities don't really understand. They don't understand that you have to have a relationship with your viewers if you want them to go out here and support your work. Like I ask many of my viewers to go out here and support the work on the SJS Direct imprint, like Spellbound. I asked them to go out here and buy books like Spellbound, because that's how I go out here and increase not only my readership but form a relationship with the reader, or to talk about important issues like I talk about men's issues with the man crisis. All of those things are about, again, forming that relationship with the viewer, and doing things like when viewers send me articles, making videos that they request. Even some of them, if they send me a Cash App, I'll make the video for them, or if they donate to the Patreon. That's all part of understanding that I serve the viewer with my content. And a lot of the celebrities, they don't understand this. They think that the viewers are just supposed to just give them their attention, but nobody's just going to give you attention if you just disrespect them and you don't sit down and talk to them. And like I'm talking to people right now. And this is why we're seeing ratings on shows that when I was a kid, the Olympics was considered a big event with 40, 50 million viewers. Events like the Oscars, these things are getting barely 9 million viewers these days. And it's all because we have a disconnect between those who run the entertainment industry and the audience that they're supposed to be serving. Now, we also have a major decline in your legacy media as related to the news. Now, your CNN, again, was a major media platform at one time, and so was your Fox News. And people no longer even watch either of those platforms, because both of those platforms are just filled with propaganda, and they're not presenting you with objective journalism. And even in a Veritas report, you had people in these companies saying that they didn't need to go out here and serve the customer. So they were like, oh, we're going to make all of these different types of content, but people had no reason to watch the content because it was so slanted and so filled with propaganda that people could not get any sort of facts. So that CNN right now is at its lowest ratings point. What's going on, Fox Strikes? Glad to see you here. Talking about the decline of Hollywood and mainstream media. But nobody watches Fox News. Nobody watches CNN. In fact, have my TV off most of the time, because most of the content on there is just pure propaganda, and there's no real facts and no real information. And what was one of the most hubris statements I ever heard was in that Veritas video, where one of these, I believe, CNN types said that, oh, we don't need to go out here and present the news. YouTubers will present the news, and YouTube is the place to go for the news. Thank you, Crash Who's All, for the super chat. I really appreciate it. And if you want to donate to the super chat, you can do so as well. And if you want to donate to the Cash App, which gives me 100% of the funds, you can donate to the Cash App as well. Now, they arrogantly sat there and said that, oh, you can go to YouTube for news, and that's what people are doing right now. When people want news these days, they go to people like Lisa Cabrera or Mr. Superboy or the African Diaspora Network or the Advice Show. Most Black viewers these days are going to those platforms for news, and they're away from mainstream platforms. And many of the people in the mainstream platforms, they're sitting there angry, talking about, oh, why aren't people watching our platforms? Well, you said you're not putting any news on those platforms. and you're not producing content that people like. And then you want to sit there and blame the internet, but it's not the internet that is the problem. No, it's not the internet that's the issue. And the internet is just giving the viewers what they want. It is people coming in again because your entertainment types took the viewers for granted and left money on the table. And again, you never want to leave money on the table as related to content, because when you leave money on the table, you are creating opportunities for others to step in. And when others step in, they're going to make the money you could have made. And when you go out here and give people opportunities, they're going to take them. And that's something many in the entertainment industry don't understand, because you either have old types who practically are just so set in their ways that they don't care anymore, or you have youngsters who are just so woke and they just don't appreciate what's there. They don't really see the big picture about why their business is declining. They don't see the big picture to why they're not making a lot of money. And they're sitting there wondering, why are my movies bombing? Why are my TV shows doing poorly? Why are people not even tuning in to my radio shows or buying my comic books or magazines? And the reason why people aren't buying the content is because the content is not catered to the customer. Now, when I go out here on the SJS Direct Imprint, I try my best to cater to the customer, and I try to make content that I believe will appeal to the customer. And as I'm trying to make content that to appeal to the customer, the first thing I do before I even go out here and put fingers to the keyboard for a book, What's Going On, Computer Robots, Glad to See You Here, is I listen to the customers. So that's one of the things I try to do whenever I'm working on a project, is I try to sit there and listen to the viewers. I try to listen to the readers, and I try to sit there and try to hear what they're saying, because you guys are the ones spending the money on the books. You guys are the ones spending money on the super chats. You guys are the ones spending money on the Cash Apps and the Patreons. And I need to show you respect, because you guys are the reason why I'm here, you and God. And that's I have to show, again, gratitude to all of you. So they don't really sit down and listen to the customer to give them what they want, but I try to listen and try to give the customer what they want. That's why I came out with this Falls book, Stop Simping in cyberspace. So I know that a lot of my viewers are out here, they're dealing with this whole trend of cyber simping, and it was a book meant to help the viewer. So I come from the place of wanting to support the viewer and give them service, like books like Stop Simping in Cyberspace, which you can pre-order on Kindle. And the paperback is coming later in October. I still am in the process of editing it. And I try to give the customer what they want. Again, we have 59 in the chat. And can we get the likes up to 55 at least? I mean, we're at 50 likes. That helps a lot. So I want to go out here and give the customer what they want. And I like to listen to many of my viewers. And that's one of the things that people in the mainstream media aren't doing. And when you don't listen to the customer, guess what? The customer feels like they're not getting heard, and they don't want to buy your product or spend time watching your TV show. So this is something that I try to do, again, is listen to my viewers. And Gabriel makes a good point about cyber simping. Yeah, it took off with social media. I definitely want to do a whole live stream on cyber simping, because it's a real big problem. But I'm going to be doing that later in October when I launch Stop Simping in Cyberspace. But yeah, and Gabriel makes another good point. Yeah, a lot of these media platforms, they are in panic mode right now. And the legacy media is terrified because they cannot influence people. They cannot get people to follow them, and they cannot get people to follow their narratives. And this is what terrifies many in the mainstream media now. Because again, in order to make the money in the media, you have to have a narrative that people are following. But people are no longer following celebrities like they used to. I mean, I remember in the days of Seinfeld, you could get a guy like George Costanza to talk about Kung Pao chicken, and people like when I was younger would, like myself, would go out here and order the Kung Pao chicken. Or you would have somebody who, like your Carrie Bradshaw, a character like that, who could influence women to go out here and wear tutus and go to Magnolia Bakery with Sex in the City. But women are not following these women on shows like Sex in the City anymore. No, they are following YouTubers, and that really distresses a lot of these people who are running the media because they're not going to be able to get the sponsorships from these companies that produce things like makeup or things like clothes. No, the people who would be getting that type of support would be YouTubers because the YouTubers have the audience in some cases. It's like what I saw in the goth subculture. A lot of goth YouTubers before goth YouTube was destroyed in the latest adpocalypse. Goth YouTube had a lot of goth YouTubers getting sponsorships, and they were able to sell merchandise from places like Shein or places like I can't remember the other name of it, but it was a major brand, and it was a major brand. I can't remember the name of it. But there were a lot of big brands over there, and people, the YouTubers, were the ones getting the merchandise, and some of them were getting the money, and that was something that many of the mainstream media they did not like. They did not like the idea of the people getting those types of endorsements because they wanted to go out here and have celebrities go out here and sell the product. So on now I remember the name Killstar. Killstar had a lot of different YouTubers getting sponsorships. I remember when you had Riri Phillips and Toxic Tears and Black Friday and many others, they were getting these outfits and putting them up there, and they were selling like hotcakes because a lot of those goth YouTubers were getting 200,000, 300,000 views, and that was again showing the influence of the YouTuber over the modern day celebrity. I'm hoping the book helps you. Price Rules All. The book Stop Simping in Cyberspace. I'm glad that you pre-ordered, and yeah, I wrote this for a lot of introverted guys so they can understand what they need to do in order to break that simp paradigm. So I'm hoping the book helps you, and I'm hoping the book helps a lot of guys out here. And again, that's one of the things I try to do when I'm trying to be out here is serve the customer, and that's something Hollywood has forgotten about, and they don't really understand that part of entertaining is service. They don't really understand that entertaining is about giving the customer something that they want, like a laugh, giving them a commentary about the family, giving them something that they can use, a solution. But what we have today with today's entertainment industry, especially with the woke types, is they want to give you a problem. And if you're giving somebody a problem, that's bad for business because people already have enough problems in their life. I'm glad to see you here, Non-Swirl Zone. Peace and blessings to you. But people have enough problems in their life, and nobody wants to pay to get another problem. That is something many of your SJW woke types don't understand. And they sit there and they think, oh, somebody needs to really hear about this problem. But they really don't understand what happens when you make these type of shows. But as somebody who grew up in the 80s with the very special episodes of Different Strokes and Blossom, those are some of the most, reviled episodes. And most people, they laugh at those kind of episodes because they come across as so condescending. And that's what happens when you make a lot of these woke shows. And that's one of the reasons why I dump Netflix, because Netflix, I used to watch them for the shows like Luke Cage and your Daredevil. And when they made shows like that, I didn't mind watching them. But as I went on, they just kept trying to preach to me. And then when they did the Cuties, which promoted what I thought was just disgusting content, that's when I decided to get rid of Netflix. And again, that was all about the content. It wasn't giving me the escape I wanted, and it was just bringing me problems. And that's one of the things that a lot of people in mainstream media don't really understand is people don't watch media to watch problems. No, they watch either to get a laugh, get a solution, or they watch to get an escape. So those are the three reasons why people watch media or read media. They want a solution, they want a laugh, or they want an escape. And we don't get that anymore. And that's why nobody watches it. Yeah, I remember, Gabriel, about Masters of the Universe Revelation. I was just absolutely disappointing. Here's an opportunity to connect with the He-Man fan base, but instead of connecting with the He-Man fan base, Kevin Smith wants to go out here and push feminism and identity politics at the expense of He-Man, instead of giving people a He-Man show like we got in the 80s or the 2002 He-Man show. So he basically blew it with that whole show, and he just showed me, again, another reason why I'm glad I walked away from Netflix. Yeah, that's completely backwards, D Wood, their idea of cuties being okay, but anime with the women that's just backwards, and it turns people off. Christ was all Jessica Jones was terrible. I mean, it was terrible after season 2, and season 3 was just hot garbage in a dumpster, lit on fire. And again, it had a lot of woke narratives, and it just turns people off. But all of these reasons are why companies like Netflix are losing money. It's the reason why Hollywood is losing money, and why your Hollywood influence is waning with the American people, because the American people don't see themselves from this detached and disconnected Hollywood. They don't see the stories about their lives being presented, and they don't see the stories that they relate to. But people see the stories that they relate to in independent media, and that's why many more people are leaving platforms like your television, your radio, your newspapers, and your magazines that are produced by the mainstream media, and they're no longer watching things like TV news because they don't see any sort of media that is talking to them. They see media that either attacks them, condescends to them, or goes out here and attacks them. And people don't want to go out here and be condescended to and talked down to. They don't want to be attacked, and they don't want to be abused by somebody who thinks that they're smarter than everybody else. And when you sit there and start acting and talking like you're smarter than everybody else, what you're doing is turning the viewer off. And that's something that your detached executives don't understand. That's something your woke producers don't understand. They don't understand that you have to connect with the viewer, and you have to make the viewer care about what you're presenting, because if you cannot persuade the viewer to care about what you're presenting, then they have no reason to go out here and watch your content. Gabriel, Substack is a subscription platform where you can go out here and present your content. I'm signed up to Substack right now. I'm getting ready to set up something there. And a lot of comic creators are moving over to Substack because they have an audience they built on Marvel and DC. And like in the 90s with Image, where Todd McFarlane, Jim Lee, and Rob Liefeld decided to leave Marvel because they felt like they were being restrained creatively and could not tell the stories that they want. What's happening now is a lot of creators, a lot of comic writers and artists are leaving those platforms to go over to independent platforms. And they're going over to independent platforms like Substack because it's more economically beneficial to them, because in that deal, they wind up owning the characters, owning the stories, and being able to have all of their rights over their own property. And they don't have to settle for taking small change from Hollywood anymore. So when you work for a company like a Marvel or a DC, you're working on a work for hire. And when you work for hire, you don't get any sort of compensation for your work. So this is another reason why so many people are walking away from your Hollywood and your mainstream media, because the compensation is absolute garbage. Thank you, Non-Swirl Zone, for the super chat. I really appreciate it. I try to put up quality content for my viewers because I want to go out here and put together a quality show. So with the Substack, people are seeing that, hey, I can go out here and put together my own content and I can get a better deal for it. And this is also what happened with Scott Snyder and Amazon. He signed a deal with them to produce content. So they are walking away. D Wood, the creators of Superman were done very badly as related to a work for hire deal. They were never really paid for that character, and they were struggling back in those days. So that's something that people had an issue with, and it's something that why people don't like work for hire. I mean, you can go out here and create a character like Rob Liefeld did with Deadpool, make $1 billion on that character, and the creator gets nothing. That's why a lot of creators walked away from Marvel in the 90s and formed Image, and that's why people are walking away right now, because your guys like James Tynion IV, who got Batman's sales back up, and you had other creators out here, they're saying to themselves, I spent years working on this book, and I'm not getting any sort of fair compensation. So if I go creator owned, I can go out here and get all of the profits. That's what I'm doing right now on the SJS Direct imprint. I mean, I own all the rights to ISIS, John Haynes, E-Steam, all the copyrights to all of those properties, and I own everything, so it's mine. And if I put it up on sale, I get all the compensation. And if I were to go and do deals, I would get all that compensation. And I've been doing that even before many of these comic pros ever thought of this, because back in the days of print on demand, I heard a lot of people snickering and making fun about writers like me going independent. But now we're seeing that independent is the only way that writers are going these days, because a lot of writers are realizing that these royalty deals just aren't cutting it for them. And they realize that since these deals are not cutting it for them, they're out here to make more money for themselves, and they're out here thinking about their future, because the companies, they go out here and they make things like these MCU movies that make $1 billion, but a creator does not get any of that money at all. And that's just not really fair to that creator. They put in that hard work, and they're saying to themselves, why am I putting in this hard work for $100 a page at best, or $200 a page, when I can go out here, create this same character, create a Kickstarter, and then if I'm lucky, I can go out here and make either a couple $1,000s, or if or can really build up a big following, I can make maybe high 5 figures or high 6 figures and be able to build an audience. And then at the end of the day, I own everything as related to that product, and some corporate type isn't getting all my money. So that's why so many people are walking away from the mainstream. And that's again leading to the decline of Hollywood and the entertainment industry, because the creators, they're not seeing a way for them to make money on these platforms. And it was next to impossible to even access these platforms, because I remember when I was out here with my screenplay All About Marilyn, that is currently up on Amazon. You can pick this one up on Amazon. And I was shopping it around. I remember how hard it was to go out here and sell a screenplay. And You had to go through this process of getting an agent. You had to just sit there and try to query these people and write them letters and hope that they eventually would get back to you. But these days, people are just saying, I'm not going to go out here and query this person. No, I'm going to go out here and crowdfund the project, hire the actors, and then what I'm going to do is go out here and promote that product in either your DVD or your streaming, and I'm going to go out here and make the project and call it a day. That's what people are doing right now, and that's what I saw actress Sally Richardson Whitfield do with a play she did about Lena Horne. People are just out here. They're like, look, I don't even want to bother with these guys, and they moved on, and that's why they're walking away. They're just saying, look, the Hollywood institution, the business model is not really benefiting me, and it's not one that's giving me a ability to be able to take care of myself or build wealth, because these intellectual properties you create, like I did with Isis and John Haynes, these are wealth building assets. Same thing with Todd McFarlane and Spawn or many other products. And Tai Chi 29 makes a good point. Yeah, Image was formed because Jim Lee, Todd McFarlane, and Rob Liefeld and many others, they weren't getting credit for their work. They weren't getting paid for their work. All they were getting was page rate. I mean, Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man was selling 500,000 units. Jim Lee's X-Men was selling 500,000 units. And they weren't getting anything but maybe $200 a page. And that's again, peanuts compared to what the company was making. And that's why they left, because if they sold a million, if Todd sells 1,000,000 Spawn, guess what? Todd gets all the money from Spawn. If Jim Lee sells 1,000,000 Wildcats, he gets all the money from Wildcats. If Rob Liefeld sells 100,000 or 200,000 Youngblood, he gets all the money from Youngblood. And if they license those products to make toys, all that money goes to them. And that's something that the reason why we saw people leaving to go form Image, and that's why people are forming Substack. Now I'm going to answer a question Joshua Davis said. He says, hey, Sean, great show. Back in the 80s, the Green Lantern, Green Arrow was very political. Well, I read all those books, and while there was politics involved, there was social commentary, and the politics wasn't so heavy to the point where it was preaching. You got both sides of the argument in the story, and you drew your own conclusion. So Green Lantern, Green Arrow, what made that book a classic from Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams was you got social commentary that presented both sides of the argument, and you got to be able to think about what you were presenting, because Oliver Queen was the liberal, Hal Jordan was the conservative, and you got both sides of the story. But in your woke comics, you only get one side of the story, and that doesn't really give you that balance to really think about what you're presenting. Now, I read all the Hard Traveling Heroes stories, and I remember the one about Speedy being on drugs, and that story, it resonated because you had all the sides presented to about the Speedy's drug issues, about being abandoned by Oliver Queen. You had your Hal Jordan trying to help. You had Dinah being that rock to support him. And you had lots of depth and layers to the story. So you didn't just get, oh, Oliver Queen is an evil white man. You got Oliver Queen was dealing with issues like losing his company and trying to figure out where he wanted to go in his life. So there was a lot more to that book than just politics. There was a lot about people and a lot of human drama that was very compelling. But we don't get that these days, because a lot of the people that they're hiring at places like Marvel and DC, they really don't have a lot of experience. And because they don't have a lot of life experience, they really don't know how to put those layers on the story. Like, for example, with the recent revelation of Tim Drake as being so-called bi, it just was something just comes out of nowhere without any sort of build-up or any sort of payoff setup. I mean, in the whole history of the character, he's never been presented this way, but this person just wants to do this arbitrarily, and editorial doesn't pull them in. So we really don't really get those layers as related to that character to make us care. And that's the kind of thing that leads to people walking away from a book. And that's also why your entertainment industry is struggling, because they don't really respect the work of older creators. You got a lot of new guys coming in. Like I was thinking that way in my 20s. Oh, I'm going to come in and change everything. And there's nobody there to pull these guys' chain and let them know that you need to see why they did this way first, and you need to respect the work of other creators. That's why I'm so against all of these token diversity hand-me-down characters, because it's a disrespect to the work of other writers, and you need to respect that other person's work before you go out here and write their story. So that's one of the things I really don't like about today's entertainment industry. I didn't like the way they desecrated Star Wars and disrespected all of that work that came before them. I didn't like what they were doing with the MCU with Spider-Man Homecoming. I mean, basically disrespecting the whole Spider-Man character and his story. I mean, if you're going to go out here and work on characters, you have to respect the work that came before you. And that's how you go out here and you generate those sales. And that's how you go out here and get customers. But today's entertainment industry, because it's so consolidated and so packed with deeply detached and disconnected people, then all they're thinking about is their agenda. All they're thinking about is what they want and how they can get what they want without ever providing anything for the customers that they are supposed to be serving. So they're not really looking to respect the customer. It's all about them. It's all about their ego. And when it's all about your ego, you really can't give the customer what they want, because it's all about you. And that's, again, something that I learned never to do, because as somebody who has worked with different populations, like when I worked at Strive with the homeless population, I had to learn how to listen to people. And when you're in the business of publishing or in other media, it's all about listening to the customer. It's all about hearing them, giving them what they want. Because if you give the customer what they want, they'll go out here and be eager to give you money. And that's something that I'm not seeing being done in today's entertainment industry. Thank you, Mobar7170. I'm glad to see you here. Thank you for the super chat. I'm sorry that you were late, but I started this live stream really late because I was watching AEW Rampage, and that was a fantastic show. I mean, even though it was 3 matches, all 3 matches had impact. All 3 matches resonated, and it was a really well put together show. So that's one of the reasons why the stream is at this new hour, because I've been watching wrestling, but that's the reason why its shows are late. But I also wanted to start maybe thinking about doing later shows, because I thought I would get a larger audience, because a lot of people come in late, because a lot of people work late, and I wanted to give them a show that they could come in and watch. Again, all about service to the customer. I mean, I know how late it is for some people. I mean, other parts of the country, it's about maybe 9 p.m. in California or 10 p.m. And other people or other parts of the globe, they're in the middle of the day. So I try to give the viewers, content that at a time that's accessible to them. That's one of the reasons why I started doing the later shows, is because some viewers, when I was doing the 12 o'clock, 2 o'clock shows, they couldn't come in and tune into the show. So that's another reason why I go out here. Oh, it's 12 noon in the Philippines, Gabriel. Wow. That's another, because I have a lot of international viewers, and they watch, they're in a different time zone, because people watch this channel all over the world. I even have people in Africa watching this channel. And again, that's the power of YouTube. You can have people all over the world watching your show, watching your content, and you can build an audience all across the globe. So that's one of the reasons why, again, I listen to the customer, but your mainstream media, they don't really sit down and listen to the viewers. And then they're sitting there wondering, why are our shows not getting high ratings? Well, your shows aren't getting high ratings, and your comics and your movies are not catching on, because you're just not listening to the customer, and you're not really listening to give them what they want. Mobile, I have Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker on DVD. I had it on VHS. I had the cut one on VHS, but I have it on DVD. And I heard it was on Tubi a while back, but I have the DVD, and it's a fantastic movie. I highly recommend everybody go see Return of the Joker. I mean, it's a 20-year-old movie, but it is absolutely fantastic, and it's just one of the best stories I have ever seen with the Batman character. So that's something that I really enjoyed watching, and that's the type of entertainment people wanted to get. They want entertainment that gives them a smile, gives them a laugh. I mean, give people something. And Hollywood has lost the ability to do that because they are just caught up in so much woke. Oh, it is on HBO Max? Wow. Then I won't have to crack out the DVD. Tai Chi 29. That's good to know it's on HBO Max. But again, I highly recommend that movie. I remember buying it from, I think it was HMV back on 86th Street in the year 2000 on VHS, and I bought it on Best Buy on DVD because I love that movie. I mean, just I consider it to be the best Batman Beyond movie ever made. I mean, the ending is what makes Return of the Joker. So I know I'm going on a bit of a tangent, but I really, again, that's something I can highly recommend. And yeah, it is Mobar 7170. It is a shame what they did to Tim Drake, but that's what happens when you have woke types who are desperate to get attention, and they just want to go out here and try to impress people, but they come from a place of insecurity. Yeah, that is a problem. Tai Chi 29, that Hollywood, they don't come out with anything original because they're afraid, and that's one of the other problems with Hollywood, is that it's filled with insecure people who are afraid of failure, who are afraid of risk, and afraid of going out here and just letting the audience decide. They just are afraid of everything. But I learned how to overcome that fear. And I just say, okay, I'm just going to put the book out and let the audience decide. If it sells, okay. If not, okay. I just move on to the next project. And that's just how it is. And that's something I try to do as related to the projects that I do. I just put the project out there and just go out here and make whatever the customer wants, and to my best of ability, and I let the customer decide what they want to go out here and pick up. So that's something I do. And again, a lot of these Hollywood types, they want to go out here and say, oh, we can't make anything original because we're afraid of failure. But failure is a part of life, and all you do is learn what doesn't work from failure, and you move on. That's why the old school Hollywood executives, they used to just go out here and they would spend maybe $3-5 million on a movie, and if it failed, okay, the movie failed, but you learn something about what the audience didn't like. So today they don't do that because they want to make these $100 million superhero movies, and then when they fail, then they get upset and say, oh, the entire genre is in bad shape. But the whole thing is, you're making content that the customer doesn't want. And in some cases, you're making content that the customer starts to take for granted. Because in the case of superhero movies like the MCU, you make the same movie over and over again. So the customer really doesn't have that ability to care about the product because they know that one's coming next week. So there's no real value in today's Hollywood and entertainment and mainstream media because they don't really, people who work there don't appreciate the products that they're producing. They don't appreciate the platforms they have, and they don't appreciate the ability to have an opportunity to come out here because they take everything for granted. So you have a lot of people, again, detached, disconnected at the top. And because they're detached and disconnected from the top, they can't connect to the audience. And when you can't connect to the audience, what the audience does is the audience then goes out here and seeks other products, just like they did in the 60s when Hollywood was making the epic movies, the movies that featured the World War II and the musicals. You had people when Tom Laughlin came out with Born Losers, or you had Melvin Van Peebles' Sweetback. They came to go see those movies instead. And the executives back then realized that they were losing so much money. So they started making movies like The Godfather, The Sting, and many other movies, and Star Wars and Rocky and Saturday Night Fever that related to people. And they were able to get their audience back. Unfortunately, in this case, because you have so much conglomeration and consolidation, I don't see how they can get their audience back, because instead of people trying to reach out to the public, we see the entertainment industry becoming more and more insular and becoming more about who you know, not what you know, or an effort to try to reach those to learn what they want. No, what we're seeing is people going out here trying to make what they like, and that's why we had an Oscar-winning Best Picture, Nomadland, that no one cared about and had no reason to watch the Oscars for. Oh yeah, Batman versus Dracula is awesome. Botboy VS, I really like that one too. I want to watch that one too, as long as when I got HBO Max for this month, and that I'm hoping to get some time to watch it this Saturday. So I'm going to be doing a show at 9 p.m. with another guy on another platform. I'll let you guys know on Facebook what that is, but I'm still out here doing other shows and other stuff, and I'm available to do other shows. So I look at the entertainment industry, and again, they're just so detached, and that's why they're in decline. But that decline ironically started from their attempt to try to gain more control over content back in 1996. Now, in 1996, when they signed the telecommunications bill, they thought that by deregulating the media, they would get more control. But ironically, they wound up losing more control, because what happened was as they started to consolidate, people then migrated, and they migrated because at the end of the day, content is king. And if you don't have the content that the customer wants, then the customer is not going to go out here and support your platform. And this is where your entertainers and your Hollywood and your mainstream media types are getting really desperate, especially on the executive level, because they just cannot go out here and relate to the customer. But they can't see that the problem isn't the viewer. The problem is the people running things. And the reason why they are the problem is because they are sitting there thinking that their way is the best. They're thinking that people have to take what they give them, and they don't really understand, again, that the business of entertainment, the business of media, the business of news is listening to the viewer, listening to the reader, listening to the customer, and providing them what they want, and take you out of the equation. That was one of the things I learned how to do early on in my writing career. And when I was working at AmeriCorps, I had to take myself out of the situation. And I took myself out of the situation because if I make it personal, I'm not going to be able to relate to the audience. So you have to take yourself out of things when you're writing or telling a story, and you have to go out here and give that customer exactly what they want. So you have to stop thinking about what you want to give them and think about what they want to have. So that's something I learned to do, again, very early on in my 20s. And I'm glad when I was working at AmeriCorps, they taught me how to go out here, and when I was working at Strive, how to write to the reader, not write for myself. And that's what I'm seeing with many of these so-called woke and SJW types. They are writing for themselves. They are caught up in their own ego. And it's all about what they want, not about what the reader needs. So that's one of the problems that I'm seeing. And Tai Chi 29 makes a good point. Yeah, all these feminist propaganda movies with these super women, it's a major turnoff because it doesn't sell what the woman wants. And what women want in a movie is they want to see a woman who is somebody a guy wants to date, a guy wants to marry. They don't want to see this masculine acting superwoman. Yeah, they had characters like Ripley and Sarah Connor, but they still had femininity and sex appeal. They don't want to see these masculine females, and the Hollywood wants to push this because they talk about empowerment, but this doesn't really appeal to the viewer, and it doesn't give the viewer any incentive to go out here and want to pay money to see things. Now, as somebody who has written a lot of women, I can make the heroines very strong and compelling, like I did for Isis Revenge of the Cyber Goddess. As you can see, she's very soft and feminine and has some sex appeal and still is a hero with power. You can still do this, but the whole thing is that the feminist propaganda, it wants to just give you muscle-bound, masculine acting women who disrespect men. Whereas I want to show how the woman complements the man, because women want to see women who are working with men get the respect of men, because women want the respect of men and they want to have a relationship with men. That's what people want to see as related to a heroine, and that's what they want to see in stories. And again, when I did Revenge of the Cyber Goddess in the Isis series, I always thought about what a girl would want in a story, and I also thought what a guy would want in a story, and that's what I do when I do stories like that. Moreover, I've noticed that trend in misandry in movies for ever starting with black men, and I'm starting to see it in movies with white men. There's a lot of man hate in movies and a lot of man hate in comics, and that's why people aren't going out here and buying movies or going to watch these TV shows, because it's just very anti-man and very disrespectful to men. And that's been going on for over 40 years. With movies like Mr. Mom, shows like Everybody Loves Raymond, Home Improvement, they just disrespect the man, but then they wonder why the man isn't watching. And the critical question I have to ask those executives in Hollywood and mainstream media is, why would I watch a show that disrespects me? That's the critical question I ask them, because as a viewer, when I see people mocking the man, disrespecting his authority, making fun of him, and just treating him like trash, that's not something I would want to go out here and see. I mean, what a man wants to see is he goes and watches a show is him being treated with respect, and he wants to see people treating him with the way he can see value. And that's what people want to see with a TV show or a movie or any type of media. You want to see somebody like you treated with respect. So pick up Revenge of the Cyber Goddess, the cover I just showed you. You can pick this book up on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. But the whole thing is that people want to see a guy being like that guy, saying you see him be a hero and be great. You want to see them go out here and go work towards greatness, accomplish their goals, get that success. That's what you want to see. But they want to give you with the woman, everything is easy for her, and the guys are all losers. And when you do content like that, nobody wants to watch that. Nobody wants to see. Most women don't want to see a guy who's a loser, and most women don't want to see a superwoman because it's overwhelming for them. It puts a real unrealistic standard on them. And this is something I talk about in my book, The Woman Crisis, where you have a lot of women, they're dealing with all of these unrealistic expectations that the feminists have put on them. And they don't want to have all that pressure put on them about, I need to be this successful superwoman. It's just a major burden on women, and it's very overwhelming to deal with. I mean, you had the feminists back then talking about how the supermodel was unrealistic, but their ideal of being this perfect career woman with everything is also just as unrealistic. But the Hollywood keeps pushing this superwoman who can do everything like a man, but women don't want to watch that because that's not what they want to be. I mean, most women, they want to be a complement to a man, a companion to a man. They want a relationship with a man, and they want to go out here and see somebody who is a wife, somebody who's a mother, or somebody who's a girlfriend. They don't want to see Superwoman and have all this pressure put on them. But the woke types think we want to have this so-called empowered woman, but that's Hollywood again, not listening to the customer or giving the customer exactly what they want. And because they don't give the customer what they want, this is why people are going and moving to platforms like YouTube or moving to other streaming services, because those content providers are giving the customer what they want. And you can't, even though you try to shut those platforms down, what will happen is people will just continue to migrate because the internet is fluid. And that's what mainstream media types and legacy media types don't understand. They don't understand that people are going to go where the content is. And if you take it off one platform, they will go to another platform. And that's what's happened in the comic book industry with Substack. That's what's happened with the Kickstarter and Indiegogo comics. People weren't getting the content they wanted at Marvel and DC. And because Marvel and DC left money on the table, they were able to make that money. And I predict that in the future, if people like myself can get the money to do Kickstarters for TV shows, what will happen is that you're going to see people then making their own TV shows and further walking away from your Hollywood, because with a crowdfunded show, you have the viewers getting what they want in a show and getting the things that they want, like a laugh, getting the things that they want, like their problem solved, and getting heard and getting what they want. And Tai Chi makes a good point. That's why manga is making money hand over fist, because they're giving you that escape. I mean, things like the Demon Slayer and many of the other mangas out here, they're making all the money because they're giving the customer what they want. But Hollywood, they are filled with a lot of, again, detached, disconnected people who don't listen to the viewer. And because they don't listen to the viewer has no interest in watching them. The people who buy the comics have no interest in reading the comics or the books, and they wind up losing. And that's a prime example. Again, manga, they took the money off the table, and they're taking that money. And I'm just waiting for other people to come in, like that guy's talking about video games. I was waiting for other independent creators to get the money together to make their own games, make their own TV shows, and we would really start to see not only the decline of Hollywood, we would start to see the collapse of Hollywood overall, because as people start taking power into their own hands for their content, we will start to see these guys really starting to get more than desperate, because people are going to alternative sources. And that's the thing that truly terrifies them, is if we started to see somebody start raising the money for a TV episode or a movie, that could possibly, again, revolutionize everything and take things to the next level. Because we've already had guys out here make $1 million on comics like Ethan Van Sciver's Cyberfrog and many others. And if we started to see game developers get into the game, I think it could really revolutionize everything. And if we started seeing people making TV shows and movies on platforms like Kickstarter and those type of platforms, and offering them up for views, that could again really change the game and practically put some real terror in many of these Hollywood types, who again I believe have become too comfortable, too relaxed, and taken their audience for granted. And they think that they have the leverage because they have the platforms, but their platforms are shaky because a lot of these platforms, they aren't really pulling in the money, and the pandemic has really done damage to their platforms because they're not pulling in the revenue. And platforms like Disney, which bought Fox, they wound up buying them on loans, and a lot of their platforms, they're very rickety right now. And that's why people like Sherry Redstone are looking for buyers, because the platforms are rickety as related to Hollywood and the mainstream media. And it's this close to collapsing, but they don't want you to see that it's this close to collapsing. Les Moonves saw where things were going. That's why he got out. But I can see the handwriting on the wall as related to mainstream media and Hollywood. And the legacy media is not in a good place. They're not in a place where they can compete. They've gotten like what I call the big fat man. They're really fat and bloated. And because they're fat and bloated, they really cannot maneuver and adapt to the changing internet marketplace. And because they can't maneuver and adapt, this is why they are crashing and burning, even though they do streaming services like Peacock and Paramount Plus. The content on there is just filled with social justice, and it just does not resonate with the viewer, and it just does not make them care enough to continue supporting the platforms that they're supporting right now. Now, if you want to support me in making more content like these live streams, you can donate to the Cash App, and that would be greatly appreciated. All that money goes directly to me so I can continue to make more content. Or you can head over to Amazon.com to pick up books like John Haynes, Taking Care of Business, and ISIS Revenge of the Cyber Goddess. Again, this is the kind of content you won't get on mainstream platforms because they don't want to present positive images of Black people or diverse images in genres like Black fantasy. So I'm asking everybody to head over to Amazon to pick up these books in paperback and Kindle format. I'm having a bit of a slow month, so I'm asking everybody to head over to Amazon to help get the sales up. I'm asking everybody to get the likes up as well, because we got, I think, 68 likes, and that's fantastic. That's going to help with the algorithm. So I really, again, I really want to see more readers pick up the books. And again, I also have Stop Simping in Cyberspace and E-Steam Cancelification out. So I want to thank everybody for coming out to tonight's stream. It's almost 1 o'clock in the morning here in New York, so I need to get back to working on the E-Steam Horror of the Hyena Woman book that I am working on right now before I go to bed. But I want to thank everybody for coming out to check out tonight's stream this late at night. And I hope you definitely will be there for next week's stream, which will probably be at 11 p.m. again, because I'm going to be watching AEW Rampage once again. So I want to thank everybody for coming out to tonight's stream. I hope you'll be there for next week's stream. Have a good night, or have a great evening or a great weekend wherever you are.